let me ask you something. Picture a millionaire in your head. Go on. Do it right now. I'm guessing you pictured someone in a flashy suit, driving a Ferrari, living in a massive mansion, maybe sipping champagne on a yacht. Am I right? That image? That's what most of us think a millionaire looks like. We see wealth as something loud, something you can spot from a mile away. But here's what's going to blow your mind today. The real millionaires. The ones quietly sitting on hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. They don't look anything like that. In fact, if you passed one on the street, you'd probably feel sorry for them. They drive used cars, they wear ordinary clothes, they live in normal neighborhoods, their kids go to public school, they clip coupons. And yet, they're millionaires. So the real question is, how? How do regular, unassuming people build serious wealth, while the people trying to look rich are secretly broke? That's exactly what we're digging into today. Stick with me, because this one is going to change the way you think about money forever. Welcome back, everyone. If you're new here, this channel is all about breaking down the world's most powerful books on money, success, and mindset, in a way that's actually useful to real people. Today, we're talking about a book called The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas J. Stanley and William D. Danko. Now, this book came out back in 1996, but honestly, it might be more relevant today than it ever was. Because in a world of Instagram flexing and look how rich I am culture, the lessons in this book are a straight-up antidote. So who wrote it, and why should you trust them? Thomas Stanley was a researcher and professor who spent decades studying wealthy Americans. Not the ultra-billionaires like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, but everyday millionaires. The dentist living down the street. The quiet guy who owns a small manufacturing business. The retired teacher who never earned more than $60,000 a year. Stanley and his co-author Danko surveyed and interviewed thousands of these people. They sat in their homes. They looked at their finances. They asked them everything. How they spent money, how they saved, what they drove, where their kids went to school, and what they found completely shattered the myths we have about wealth. The book became a massive bestseller, and it's been helping people rethink money ever since. Let's get into the good stuff. The very first thing Stanley and Danko discovered, and honestly, the thing that started the whole book, is that most millionaires look absolutely nothing like what we expect. Here's how they stumbled onto this idea. They were hired to research wealthy consumers for a financial services company. So they set up focus groups in what they thought were fancy, upscale neighborhoods. They brought in expensive food, fine wine, the works. They wanted to impress the wealthy people they were about to interview. Then the wealthy people showed up, and they looked ordinary. They wore jeans. They didn't care about the fancy food. They seemed almost uncomfortable with all the extravagance. That moment made Stanley scratch his head. And then he started digging deeper. What he found is that there are basically two types of people when it comes to money. The first type, he called them under-accumulators of wealth. These are people who look rich. They have the nice car, the big house, the designer clothes. But when you look at their actual bank account and net worth, it's shockingly low. Sometimes they're actually in debt. All that stuff they own, it's financed. They're performing wealth, not building it. The second type, he called them prodigious accumulators of wealth. These are people who don't look rich. They live in modest homes. They drive practical cars. They don't wear flashy clothes, but their net worth? Enormous. They've been quietly stacking wealth for decades. Here's a real example from the book. Stanley and Danko profiled a man. Let's call him Mr. B. He's in his late 50s. He owns a small welding business. He drives a pickup truck. He's worn the same brand of boots for 20 years. His house is in a normal neighborhood. Net worth? Over $3 million. Compare that to a high-earning doctor in a wealthy neighborhood, drives a luxury car, lives in a $1.2 million home, kids in private school. Looks like wealth. But he has almost no savings, carries significant debt, and has almost no real net worth to speak of. Same country, completely different financial realities. The lesson? Stop confusing consumption with wealth. What you spend is not what you have. Wealth is what you keep. Okay, so we know millionaires often look ordinary, but why? What's actually driving their financial success? The single most powerful habit in the book is this: millionaires consistently spend far less than they earn. It sounds almost too simple, right? But it's profound when you really understand it. Stanley found that the typical millionaire in his study lives in a house that costs less than what they could easily afford. They drive a car that's a few years old, often not even the most premium brand. They don't take extravagant vacations every year. They don't upgrade their phones the second a new one comes out. And this isn't because they're cheap or miserable. It's because they made a decision early on. And that decision is essentially, I'm not going to let my lifestyle consume all the money I make. There's a concept in the book that really stuck with me. Stanley talks about what he calls economic outpatient care. That's when wealthy parents keep financially supporting their adult children, paying their rent, their car payments, their vacations. And here's the twist. The more financial support adult children receive, the less wealth they tend to accumulate themselves. Why? Because when someone else is covering your expenses, you never really learn to manage money. You don't develop the discipline. You keep spending at a level you haven't actually earned, and you never build the muscle of living below your means. The self-made millionaires in the study, most of them received very little financial help from their parents. They had to figure it out. And that necessity? It was actually a gift. Think about it this way. Imagine you make $100,000 a year. If you spend $95,000, even on nice things, you're only saving $5,000. After 20 years, with decent investment returns, you might have $200,000. But if you spend $70,000 and invest the other $30,000 every year, after 20 years, you could be sitting on well over $1 million. Same income, completely different result. The only difference is the gap between what you earn and what you spend. That gap is where wealth is built. Protect it. Here's another thing the millionaires in this study had in common. And it's not what you might expect. They were intentional about where they put their time, their energy, and their money. Stanley found that wealthy people spend significantly more time, like hours per month, planning their finances than average people do. They have budgets. They track what they spend. They sit down with their investments. They know what their net worth is right now, not approximately. Meanwhile, the looking rich crowd, they barely think about it. They spend based on feeling. They buy what they want when they want it. They don't track where the money goes, which means it just goes. But here's the interesting flip side. The true wealth builders in the study weren't obsessed with earning more. They weren't always chasing the next promotion or the next big salary jump. Instead, they were laser-focused on keeping more of what they had. One couple in the book was particularly striking. They'd been married for 40 years. Their combined income was never more than average, maybe $85,000 at peak. But their net worth was nearly $2 million. How? They budgeted religiously. Every dollar had a job. They bought used cars and drove them for a decade. They never paid full price for anything if they could help it. They invested consistently, every single month, without fail. Their whole financial life was organized. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't exciting, but it worked. Stanley makes a point that really hit home. Most people spend more time planning a vacation than they spend planning their financial future. We agonize over what hotel to book, what restaurants to visit, what excursions to do. But we don't spend even 1 hour a month looking at where our money is actually going. That right there is one of the biggest differences between people who build wealth and people who don't. It's not talent, it's not luck, it's attention. Now, let's talk about something the book gets really specific about. How millionaires actually make their money. Surprise! It's usually not Wall Street. It's usually not tech startups or celebrity-level careers. The most common millionaires in Stanley's research were small business owners, entrepreneurs, and self-employed professionals. Think plumbers, contractors, pest control operators, dry cleaners, farmers, small manufacturers. These aren't glamorous. Nobody's making a Netflix documentary about the owner of a trash hauling company. But that guy, he might be worth $5 million. Why do small business owners build wealth so effectively? First, they have control over their expenses. When you work for a corporation, there's a structure. You get paid a salary, you pay your taxes, and what's left is yours. But a business owner can be strategic about how money flows, how the business is structured, and how profits are reinvested or distributed. Second, they build equity. A business is an asset. As it grows, it becomes worth more. Employees trade time for money, a transaction that ends when the workday ends. Business owners build something that keeps growing even when they're not working. Third, and this one is subtle, successful small business owners often chose unglamorous industries on purpose. There's less competition. The margins are better. Nobody else wants to do it. Stanley actually says this directly. Many millionaires chose boring businesses precisely because they were boring. No hype, no competition, just a steady stream of customers with real needs. Now, you might not want to start a business, and that's totally fine. The lesson here is still applicable. Whatever career you're in, ask yourself, am I building something here? Am I gaining equity, skills, a reputation, an audience? Something that compounds over time? Or am I just trading hours for dollars and spending everything I make? Wealth is built by people who think like owners, whether or not they technically own a business. This next one might be the most controversial lesson in the whole book, and honestly, it might be the one that hits hardest for parents. Stanley found that one of the biggest silent wealth destroyers is the way we raise and support our children. Here's the thing. Every good parent wants to give their kids a better life. And when you start to build wealth, the natural instinct is to share it, to give your kids the best schools, the nicest things, financial help when they're adults. But Stanley's data showed something uncomfortable. Kids who receive high levels of financial support from wealthy parents tend to build significantly less wealth of their own. There's a reason for this. When someone else is funding your lifestyle, you don't have a real relationship with money. You don't feel the pressure that teaches discipline. You spend freely because the consequences aren't fully real. And here's the double whammy. The parents are not only slowing down their children's financial development, they're also draining their own wealth in the process. The solution the book suggests isn't to be cold or withhold love. It's to be intentional. Teach your kids about money early. Let them experience real financial consequences. Support their education and values, not their consumption habits. The millionaires in the study often raised their kids with a clear message. We have money, but that's ours. You'll build yours. And those kids? They actually turned out to be better with money, more resilient, and, surprise, surprise, wealthier. It takes courage to parent this way in a world where we're conditioned to give our kids everything. But the long-term gift of teaching them self-sufficiency is worth so much more than any car payment you could make for them. All right. Here's one of the most practical parts of the whole book, and I want to make sure you actually remember this. Stanley gives us a formula to figure out if you're building wealth at the right pace. Ready? Take your age, multiply it by your gross annual income. Divide by 10. That's your expected net worth if you're on track. So if you're 40 years old and you make $80,000 a year, 40 times 80,000 equals $3,200,000. Divide by 10, and you get $320,000. If your net worth is around $320,000 at age 40, making that income, you're right on track. If you're at double that, around $640,000, you're a prodigious accumulator of wealth. If you're well below it, you got some work to do. Now look, this formula isn't perfect. It doesn't account for people who are very young and just starting out, or people with very high incomes who've only recently started earning, but it's a brilliant gut check. Most people have never even asked themselves, given my income and my age, how much should I have saved by now? Most people don't want to know the answer, but asking the question is the first step, because once you see the gap, you can start closing it. So let's bring it all together. The Millionaire Next Door is not a book about getting rich quick. It's not about crypto or stock picks or some secret formula that only insiders know. It's a book about something far more powerful and honestly far more accessible. Living with intention. The millionaires in this book aren't special. They're not geniuses. They didn't have extraordinary luck or connections. Most of them were just disciplined, consistent, patient. They knew that wealth isn't built in a day, but it's also not random. It's the result of thousands of small, boring, intentional decisions made over a lifetime. They chose to drive the car that got them to work, not the car that impressed their neighbors. They chose to invest the raise instead of upgrading their lifestyle. They chose to budget, even when they didn't have to. They chose to build businesses and skills, not just collect paychecks. And little by little, year by year, those choices compounded into real, lasting financial freedom. Now, here's what I want you to do. Take one lesson from this video. Just one. And act on it this week. Maybe it's setting up a budget for the first time. Maybe it's calculating that net worth formula and facing the number honestly. Maybe it's just having a conversation with your partner or spouse about what you want your financial future to actually look like. You don't have to fix everything overnight, but you have to start somewhere. The Millionaire Next Door didn't get there by accident, and neither will you, but you absolutely can get there. And the path is simpler than you've been led to believe. If you got value from this video, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find this content, and honestly, the more people who understand these ideas, the better off we all are. If you're new here and you want more breakdowns like this, books on money, habits, and building the life you actually want, go ahead and subscribe. I put out videos like this every week, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Which lesson hit hardest today? Was it the part about living below your means? The wealth formula? Or maybe the one about raising kids? Drop it below. I read every comment, and I genuinely want to know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.